Come, let us worship together. Let us open our minds to the challenge of reason. Open our hearts to the healing of love. Open our lives to the calling of conscience. Open our souls to the comfort of joy. Astonished by the miracle of life, grateful for the gift of fellowship, confident in the power of living faith, we are here gathered. Come, let us worship. Life of our faith by igniting our chalice. The spark of new beginning invites us to create a sacred space, to reflect on where we have been and where we are going. Even knowing that this particular flame will intentionally end with our chalice extinguishing, we fear not its end, for we know with brave hearts that every ending of our lives leads us to be sent forth, making a new beginning. Good morning, and welcome to Eastrose Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. My name is Patty Walsh, and I am the program leader for today. We welcome those who are joining us in our physical space in our chapel, and those who join us through service. To our first-time visitors, we extend a special welcome. We are glad you joined us today. We acknowledge the lands where our fellowship gathers and that are now home to our widespread community. Going back 13,000 years, these lands were the traditional village sites of the Multnomah, the Wasco, the Wishram, Cowlitz, Klamath, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kayupuya, Molalla, and other peoples who made their lives here. We thank the original caretakers of this land and their descendants, who are among us still. In peace, may we share this land and honor one another. Our speaker this morning is our own Reverend Patty Pomerantz, who will explore the trapeze as she prepares Eastrose and herself for her own retirement. If you have joys and concerns to share today, please write them on the blue pages available in the narthex and place them in the offering basket. They will make their way up here. Or you can put them in the chat in the video stream. Those will also be included. Announcements go on the white slips and will be delivered to the podium before the service. Some of us are bringing our best selves to this space. And some of us are bringing our struggling selves, including pieces we might be ashamed of. All of us are welcome here, and all of us are loved. Some of us already have relatively open hearts, and some of us aren't quite there yet because our hearts have gotten a little bit beat up this week. We might have forgotten how to trust and how to be open. Your heart is welcome here. No matter how bruised, we welcome you among us. All of us are imperfect, but here we may drop our defenses and trust that what happens in worship is powerful and life-giving. Together, we affirm that this day and our being together will make us braver, more compassionate, and wiser than when we woke up this morning. As we enter into this Eastrose transition, let us remember the words of William Ellery Channing. Each of us is meant to have a character all our own, to be what no other can exactly be, and to do what no other can exactly do. We bring each of our unique selves to this community. Please now join us in singing our opening hymn, "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple." This is in the Gray Hymnal, number 16. Please stand as you are able. Barbara will play through once, and then we sing.
Slightly edited. This story is called "The People Could Fly," as told by Virginia Hamilton. They say the people could fly. Say that long ago in Africa, some of the people knew magic, and they would walk up on the air like climbing onto a gate. I haven't figured out how to do that. And they flew like blackbirds over the fields, black shiny wings flapping against the blue up there. Then, many of the people were captured for slavery. The ones that could fly shed their wings. They couldn't take their wings across the water on the slave ships. Too crowded, don't you know? The folks were full of misery then, got sick with the up and down of the sea, so they forgot about flying when they could no longer breathe the sweet scent of Africa. Say the people who could fly kept their power, although they shed their wings. They kept their secret magic in the land of slavery. They looked the same as other people from Africa who had been coming over who had dark skin. Say you couldn't tell anymore one who could fly from one who couldn't. One such man who could was an old man. Call him Toby. And standing tall, yet afraid, was a young woman who once had wings. Call her Sarah. Now Sarah carried a babe tied to her back. She trembled to be so hard-worked and scorned. The slaves labored in the fields from sunup to sundown. The owner of the slaves, calling himself master, say he was a hard lump of clay, a hard glinty coal, a hard rock pile wouldn't be moved. His overseer on horseback pointed out the slaves who were slowing down. So the one called driver cracked his whip over the slow ones to make them move faster. That whip was a slice open cut of pain. So they did move faster, they had to. Sarah hoed and chopped the row as the babe on her back slept. Say the child grew hungry. That babe started a bawling too loud. Sarah couldn't stop to feed it, couldn't stop to soothe and quiet it down. She let it cry. She didn't want to. She had no heart to croon to it. Keep that thing quiet, called the overseer. I must go soon, Sarah told Toby. Soon, he said. Sarah couldn't stand up straight any longer. She was too weak. The sun burned her face. Toby was there, where no one else to help her and the babe. Now, before it's too late, panted Sarah. Now, Father. Yes, daughter, the time has come, Toby answered. Go as you know how to. He raised his arms, holding them out to her. Kum yali kum buba tambe, and more magic words. And so quickly, they sounded like whispers and sighs. The young woman lifted one foot on the air, then the other. She flew clumsily at first, with the child now held tightly in her arms. Then she felt the magic, the African mystery. Say she rose just as free as a bird, as light as a feather. The overseer rode after her, hollering. Sarah flew over the fences. She flew over the woods. Tall trees could not snag her, nor could the overseer. She flew like an eagle now until she was gone from sight. No one dared speak about it, couldn't believe it, but it was, because they that was there saw that it was. So the next day was dead hot in the fields. A young man's slave fell from the heat. The driver come and whipped him. Toby come over and spoke words to the fallen one. The words of ancient Africa once heard are never remembered completely. The young man forgot them as soon as he heard them. They went way inside him. He got up and rolled over on the air. He rode it a while, and he flew away. Another and another fell from the heat. Toby was there. He cried out to the fallen and reached his arms out to them. Kum kankayali, kum tambe, whispers and sighs. And they too rose on the air. They rode the hot breezes. The ones flying were black and shining sticks, wheeling above the head of the overseer. They crossed the rows, the fields, the fences, the streams, and were away. Seize that old man, cried the overseer. I heard him say the magic words, seize him. The one calling himself master come running. The driver got his whip ready to curl around old Toby and tie him up. The slave owner took his hip gun from its place. He meant to kill old black Toby. But Toby just laughed. Say he threw back his head and said, don't you know who I am? Don't you know some of us in this field, he said it to their faces, we're the ones who fly. And he signed the ancient words that were a dark promise. He said them all around to the others in the field under the whip, Baba Yali, Baba Tambe. There was a great outcrying. The bent backs straightened up. Old and young who were called slaves and could fly joined hands. Say like they would ring sing, but they didn't shuffle in a circle. They didn't sing. They rose on the air. They flew in a flock that was black against the heavenly blue. Black crows or black shadows, it didn't matter. They went so high, way above the plantation, way over the slavery land. Say they flew away to freedom. And the old man Toby flew behind them, taking care of them. He wasn't crying. He wasn't laughing. He was the seer. And that's the end of the story.
Eastrose is a self-funded church, totally dependent upon our contributions to function. Without your financial support, whether it be annual pledges or weekly donations in the basket, when they're passed around, we would not be able to offer the type of services that you have come to love and depend upon. Additionally, half of each week's collection goes to support a nonprofit. This month, we are supporting East County Rising. East County Rising is a grassroots organization energizing East Multnomah County residents to create equitable, livable conditions, serving underrepresented and marginalized people in our area, in the area that this church is located in, actually. Please consider how much you depend upon these Sunday services at Eastrose and give what you are able during these unprecedented times. You can donate right now, and here's how. In a minute, you're going to see a slide with a QR code on the bottom with, oh, it's already up. You can use that QR code on your cell phone, in silent mode, please, to go right to our website and make a donation. Or you can do it after the service, which is probably more polite anyway, but we give to remind ourselves how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and sacred space. We give with a faith that together we have enough. Ours is a welcoming congregation where we find connection to a spiritual community, our spiritual community, where we find meaning. Ours is a sharing community where our joys are amplified, and a caring community where our sorrows are lessened. We take this moment to reflect on our joys and sorrows and to acknowledge the mutual support of our community. Barbara will place a stone in the water at the altar for each joy or concern. Barbara will now place a blue and yellow stone in remembrance of the people of Ukraine. And now, Barbara will also place a green stone in the water for those joys and sorrows held in our hearts. Now, please join us. Sing from your seats, but join us in singing hymn number 352 in the gray hymnal, our meditation song, Find a Stillness. number 352. For everything, there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry, a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit searching, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace.
I chose the story today because sometimes it feels
Unitarian Universalist may close within 1 hour when you arrive. Excuse me.
Okay, I'll start over. I chose the story today because sometimes it feels like there's some secret overseer who is controlling our lives, our culture, our world, especially when the pandemic and government has welcomed in layers of fake news. When did fake news even become a thing? Is impartiality even a word anymore? Where there was a big difference between newspapers and tabloids, now it seems like every news outlet, every newspaper is a tabloid. They just don't call themselves that. The story is a fable that we can connect to Eastrose. The master could be the pandemic, calling the shots in our lives. The overseer and driver, the actual illness, coming into our lives unbidden, either by infecting you or someone you love. And the seer, Toby, and his daughter, Sarah, are our spirits, our imaginations, our inspiration. So when I look at my wishes and hopes for Eastrose going forward, though limited by the context of our world today, still, you can do and be anything you choose. I want to look at my 8 years with you, review our accomplishments as a community and perhaps my own. Some of you may have heard this story. There's a person on a flying trapeze. Think high up in the big top where trapeze artists usually hang out. And he's swinging back and forth. And then there's a second person on a trapeze who is swinging to catch this person number one. But person number one is terrified. They can't seem to let go. Everybody is trying to coax them. Let go, let go. Finally, person one lets go, only to find out that life happens in the letting go, in between the two trapezes. Kind of like where God is. Well, yeah. Sometimes I think that congregational ministry is like that. I'm so busy holding all the loose ends that I forget to sometimes let go and see what's really going on. Spoiler alert, I don't think I'm likely to actually fly on a trapeze in this life, at least. But that image of real life happening between the incidents and problems, not within the pandemic, but beyond it, resonates with me. One thing I find very interesting is that I can't really remember anything that happened before the pandemic without prompts. Here at Eastrose, we totally changed our job descriptions, whether paid or volunteer. It felt like the church had three components: people who stayed involved in these new church requirements. For instance, the board and worship committee met together every week for several weeks. Both of these groups met monthly before the pandemic, now weekly. Then there were those who weren't actually participating in leadership, but who were attending the Zoom services, which were themselves requiring new and different skills. And then there were the people who faded away, our families, those who joined other churches that weren't closed even at the beginning of the pandemic, or others who just disappeared. I hope some of them will return, but who knows? Also, there were newcomers, folks who moved to Gresham and left a different Unitarian church behind, those who lived out of town, like the student in Idaho, and attended remotely. I think some of those people have faded away as well. It's been a long time since the pandemic started, and we're still not back to normal. I'm not sure there is a normal, even now. I wonder, what about you? What has your experience of church been like since the pandemic? Do you remember how things were before the pandemic? Anybody? Yeah. And now, to add to the disconnect, here I am about to finish my ministry at Eastrose with you. And I find myself looking back as I no longer have a role with you after June 30th. So I want to see if I can pull out some of those loose ends that we did accomplish during those years. There were probably about 200 sermons that I preached. Some of those stand out for me. I imagine you have your own list. But the top of my list is the Diwali service with Patty Walsh, wondering if the church was ever going to be rid of the colored sand that crept in. Then there was the time that Owen had the choir sing, "Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat," I believe for the Christmas Eve service. That may have been the year that every service I did, I named with the title of a song. There was the Passover Seder meal we did with the help of Morgan Hagler Herndon. There must have been at least 10 auction sermons I delivered. Some of them were books, which for the most part I enjoyed. But there were others where you had a specific topic you wanted, like, don't throw the Christians to the lions. Do you remember the Harley-Davidson motorcycle sermon, where I resisted coming down the aisle in leathers? There were choir and speech choir sermons. I hope you'll be able to create more of a music program soon. That's one of the areas that has really languished, with no music committee, no choir director, no voice choir. Then there were all the rites of passage. I haven't actually counted those, but what an honor it is to mark the rituals in your life with you: weddings, funerals, child dedications. They started early in my time with you. Does anybody remember Perky Rasmussen? I think was the first memorial service, which Sumitranga Watson helped me with. Before the pandemic, we had quite a long saga with homeless folks. We worked with the Rockford Police, had some dedicated congregants, Larry Adams and Therese Langevin come to mind. We lost some congregants concerned about personal safety, and we had new weekly tasks, like cleaning up the grounds every Sunday morning to make sure there were no needles on the playground, for instance. And I do remember one day, wasn't a Sunday, and Richard, don't prove me wrong here, but when Richard and I cleaned out a veritable apartment, complete with a brush door, under some bushes right outside our front doors. Can we do that? Yeah. There were some scary times, some bad actors, and still today there is one guy who sleeps here, but he also cleans up the grounds for us. Every little bit helps. This is another problem that isn't going away. How will Eastrose accommodate our houseless neighbors? How are you called to help those less fortunate than we are? We sold our property. That process started before the pandemic and ended during the pandemic. It took a tremendous toll on board and staff energy. We lost our tenant, Kinship House, because we needed to get an inspection by the fire marshal, and we were facing probably thousands of dollars of upgrade to continue to rent it to anyone, either commercial or residential. In order to sell it, we had to figure out how to tabulate a vote virtually. But we were finally able to convert the gift of our house from something that was going to eat up our reserves to an over $300,000 endowment. And now the house is being loved by a family, as it should be. We spent a very long time deciding what kind of AV upgrade to consider, which gave Katie Norris and Cynthia Hopkins long enough to write a grant, which gave us over $15,000. We now have a system that will serve us well into the future, serve our local community, and maybe turn into rental income. And we have an AV tech, I'm trying not to call him an AV wizard, John Netherton, who is taking a lot of weight off of congregants who used to sit back there, particularly, Patty Walsh and Phyllis Adams, and the entire worship team. We developed clear lines of communication and support with our UU regional staff, including monthly specialized meetings for congregational presidents and leadership development opportunities. I hope these will continue to support our congregation. And over the years, the board started to own more of its job, and the committees also, which brings me to the most important piece of my ministry, though you may not have noticed it. I have always been committed to shared ministry. The minister and the board form a partnership with different responsibilities. The minister is really a visitor to the congregation, a temporary member for the length of their tenure. This is something I take to heart. So for 8 years, I have been sometimes gently and sometimes not so gently nagging some of you about projects or problems you tried to give to me or other staff that weren't ours. Often it meant things didn't happen or they were late. I did try to maintain some time away from church work, but it turns out I'm not very good at that. Time happens in the brain, and I work in my heart. Didn't say it was smart, just is. When I arrived, Eastrose still acted very much as a family church, where the pastor and administrator acted as parents, making most of the decisions, controlling information, and social boundaries were very unclear. Some people prefer that kind of informality, but it's no way to grow a church. So I politely declined your invitations to socialize or do certain church projects, and I didn't take on committee work. Actually, that's probably not true, but it's what I aspired to, except for worship. Being a friendly minister without being a friend is very difficult. It's difficult to explain, especially when a congregation is used to the minister taking care of things that weren't done by committees and the board, or weren't on anybody else's bandwidth, and being very much a fabric of the social life of the congregation. And it's difficult to do. Since most of my time during the past 8 years has been you, I think about you, I visit with you, I write sermons for you and rites of passage. Then with the pandemic, which greatly reduced our time together but demanded a whole new set of responsibilities, online worship, keeping the church going without using the building, doing all committee, board, worship work remotely, increased responsibilities, and time spent on church work, at the same time, the pandemic shrinking who we spent time with, really put a damper on our lives both within and beyond the church. Everyone made their own pathway through this time, some forming pods of friends, some exercising their inner introverts, others responding to what they thought was a government hoax. What we do know is that although we tried to offer things for our families, there wasn't really anything for them, especially for the young children who needed time to actually socialize with their own cohort, but not more time in front of a screen, which made it hard for families to participate in church. So here's what went on in my house during the pandemic. We had 2 churches to run, 2 spiritual direction practices, 1 counseling practice, and we live in an old house, which made for Wi-Fi dead spots, including my office. We finally got a mesh system, which at least allowed us to have more privacy when we were both working. But what it meant was the work time and space had to be negotiated. Where could I be when Tony was with her clients? Where would Tony hold her mass in the house? Where could I be when I was leading worship? Even what to do when our neighbors' tiny, barky dogs were right outside our windows serenading us. I'm not usually sensitive to such noise, but when I'm having trouble writing and there's bark, bark, space, bark, space, you get the message. I had hoped to stretch my time with you until we were free and clear of the pandemic, experiencing what will become our new normal. But that's not happening. What is happening is this afternoon at our congregational meeting, you have the opportunity to elect a full slate of board members, something that has not happened for the past few years. And there's a new energy for committees and programs. How wonderful it was to see the outreach and membership committees join forces and to see things like congregational hikes advertised in Petals. It's been a long time, but I think everything is looking rosy for Eastrose right now. In 2 weeks, I'll talk about what our programs look like as you move into a new time in your history. Until then, amen, shalom, salam, peace. And I invite you to rise in body and spirit and join in singing hymn number 108, My Life Flows On.
We extinguish this chalice, but we leave our connections, our concerns, our care for each other, our service to each other, to the world, and to our faith continues. Until we are together again, friends, be strong, be well, be loving.
As we end today's service and go off into our other lives after the congregational meeting, may we dream big. May we hold the thoughts of what Eastrose can become and is already becoming. May you hold one another close, sharing joys and sorrows. And may we all turn on our little chalice blinking light and share with the universe. So may it be. Amen.
Thank you, Barbara. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to me, personally, to have a service entirely with live music. Just touches my heart. Thank you. I also want to thank John, the AV wizard, Patty Pomerantz, our own Reverend Patty Pomerantz, our minister, and Shari Sirkin, who is in the back on the stream, keeping track, taking care of joys and concerns, and doing like everything else. And I should probably also thank Norma. Now that we're back in this building, it needs to be cleaned all the time. So thank you. I have some other announcements, but first let me tell you that the congregational meeting will occur after the service today at 12:30. It'll be both here in person and over Zoom. For those who are here, we will have pizza. The Zoom meeting will open for the congregational meeting, will open at noon, and you can find the link in the pedals. If you are attending this service over our current streaming service and will participate in the cafe conversations today, be aware that you will need to log out of the cafe conversation to log into the actual congregational meeting. They are not the same meeting. The cafe conversation will last for 30 minutes. And here are other announcements. That the Eastrose hikes are back. The Wednesday trip to Dog Mountain has been changed to Tuesday. That's Tuesday, May 17th. You're all still leaving from here at 8 a.m. And Eric Chewy is the guy who put this in, and I imagine the guy to ask if you got questions. We'll do that one last. Oh, no, I guess we'll do this one now. Okay, on June 19th is Patty, our own ministers, her last day as pastor of Eastrose. So following the service, we will be having a potluck and to show our appreciation of her 8 years of dedication to Eastrose. Please put this on your calendars, and this comes to us from Keene and a bunch of other people. Whole lot of other people.
Call it a party potluck.
It's a party potluck.
Celebration.
That sounds even better, a party potluck after the service on June 19th. So now it's time to visit, because I have no other announcements.
And coffee.
And coffee, and pizza.
And